Now, I made a bit of a mistake with that last yew bow. It turned out it wasn't £82 draw weight, it was 72. And what had happened is I made the fatal beginner's mistake of getting impatient. So instead of just giving it a tiny little rasp, I got the farrier's rasp on it. Anyway, I've said to the guy, if he's not happy with it, I'll give him a complete refund and or make him another bow. But I suggested he try it first, because a lot of people, you know, they think they want a £100 bow or an £80 bow and they can't actually draw it. You know, they're searching for performance that what they probably need is a good bow rather than a particularly heavy one. Anyway, so I'm probably going to make him another bow, but I started roughing out a couple of staves that are potential replacements that I will make the right draw weight. Ironically, he said he said this time we'll call it 80 to 85. Well, if only he'd told me that in the first place, I wouldn't have tried to take off those last £5. But never mind, you'll see of these two, the one on this side has got a lovely natural deflex reflex, and the other one is just deflexed. Now, there's some silly rules and regulations from some longbow societies that say you're not supposed to, you know, steam bend bows and what have you. But pray tell me, how can you tell if this stave has been steam bent or is naturally that shape? Anyway, I sorted out my stash to find suitable wood, and then they're just nice for about 85-90. And I sorted out my mega staves, my big hefty ones. Now these are premium Pacific yew, I think most of them. They're like real heavy warbow staves. That's probably the best, but you see even that's got a bit of deflex. And this one here is bonkers. This was bought from a well-known emporium, and you see that's actually, blimey, it's windy in here. That wasn't quite that shape initially. It's carried on seasoning. I think it's taken a lot of deflex. Well, again, I could leave the deflex and reflex the tips until it looks like that one, but then that would be against the rules for some of the societies. It's just madness, isn't it? And are they telling us that medieval bowyers didn't know how to steam bend? And this big one, that's very nice, that's very handsome wood. That's got a tiny bit of reflex. I think that belongs to one of my mates, John Davies. It's got his name on it. Whether he gave it to me or it's his and he wants me to turn it into a bow, I just can't remember. But not all these staves belong to me as such. People give me staves and want me to turn them into bows. Unfortunately, it's easy to lose track when you're seasoning them, which is one reason why I just tend to make them for people I know. But anyway, that just gives you an idea of the fact that not all bow staves are actually straight in the first place, and not all reflex deflex bows are fancy ones that have been glued up or steamed or what have you. But I'm thinking this is probably favourite for the replacement, or maybe that one with a bit of reflex put in the tips. I think they may be, or this one certainly may be, from the same batch of timber, which was probably from a hedgerow down, I don't know, somewhere west of London, from my mate Rob. Not sure, can't remember. I normally write on them, but if I don't know where they came from in the first place, I can't write it on there. There you go. There, I've just tidied things up a bit and put my straight edge against this stave, this premium Pacific yew stave from a well-known archery retailer. I'm not taking the piss, there's nothing wrong with it, it's a perfectly good stave. It's just it's got some features that are worth showing. big knot here, and you think, oh dear, that could be a problem. But no, there's plenty of meat there. From the back of that sapwood, we've got a good 30mm to the edge of the knot, and that will mostly disappear when it's shaped anyway. So there's plenty of bulk there. Plenty of nice sapwood. Clearly defined sapwood heartwood boundary. It's a very nice stave, except it's got 2 1/4 inches of deflex. Now my rule of thumb, or rule of finger, is if you lie a bow flat against the ground, if you can get 1 finger between the grip and the floor, that's good. 2 fingers is okay. 3 fingers is excessive. So that's in terms of set normally. So you can see it's got rather a lot of deflex, so it would require some work. But the thing to do is obviously you get the bow shaped up and pretty much tillered, maybe 75% tillered, then use heat, steam or whatever to, you know, get some of the deflex out, or to put some reflex in the tips. Now, because of the big knot at the grip there, I wouldn't try and pull deflex out there, because you're liable to make it crack where the knot is. But it just shows, you know, even if you're buying a premium stave from a good reputable supplier, you still have to know what you're doing, and you still have to be careful. And that's basically the difference between making bows from, you know, machined timber, laminates, and working with a stave. It's just a bit more challenging working with a stave. And then you've got to explain why the bow is heavily deflexed to people who don't understand, because they say, oh, it's taken a lot of set, it's bent like a banana, and you try and explain, but that was the shape of it in the first place. Oh dearie me. Right, anyway, enough of that. Meanwhile, I've been fiddle-arsing around, and I made a little rotating live centre for when I'm turning up arrow points, except as my brother rightly guessed, when you push an arrow point against that when you're turning it in the lathe, there's not enough friction to rotate it anyway. I used to just use a little piece of brass held in the tailstock chuck with a little centre drilled hole in it, and that worked just as well. But this was just an exercise in something to make on the lathe. And that was the start of the first one. I bored that hole a bit too big and the bearings were loose, but you know, I'm not a machinist. I've never had any proper metalwork training at all, so it's fun to tinker on the lathe, and it teaches me stuff. I'm also waiting on a new motor for the dust extractor. I stuck new brushes in it and it lasted a bit longer, but then it blew the circuit breaker again. I think there's an internal short and it was smelling a bit. A new dust extractor is only about £100, but I don't like spending money. The motor's only about 20, so I'll replace the motor. I might have to fiddle about with these brackets, but it's all stuff that keeps me busy. I need to make some more arrows as well. Had one broken at the weekend. Well, that was nice actually. Went out, did a bit of shooting, and one of the guys brought 2 of his kids and their friends along. These weren't kids, they were, I don't know how old they were, old enough to drive, so they don't really qualify as kids. But I took out the little hazel bow and a whistling arrow, which added to the amusement. Enough rambling, I better get on with something.